Fumi was still very young when her mother took her away to live in the city with her uncle, Mr. Gbero. That night, before traveling to the city to meet Uncle Gbero, Fumi's mother sat her down and spoke softly but firmly. "Fumi, listen to me. Make sure you listen to your uncle. He is a good man. Don't be a disrespectful child. Remember everything I've told you, and do whatever your uncle tells you to do. Do you understand?" Fumi nodded, her young mind absorbing her mother's words. Her mother then began to pack Fumi's luggage for the journey, her hands moving slowly, as if reluctant to let go. Very early the next morning, Uncle Gbero drove into the compound. Fumi was already prepared, her small bags neatly packed, waiting for her uncle to take her to the city. She climbed into the car happily, her eyes bright with excitement. As the engine started, Fumi's mother stood by the car, her face a mix of pride and sadness. The city was far from their town, too far for her to visit often. She leaned in and whispered, "Fumi, the city is a place of modern life. Be wise, my child. And don't forget everything I've told you." She waved as the car pulled away, her hand lingering in the air long after the car had disappeared from sight. Uncle Gbero drove quickly, the road stretching endlessly before them. For Fumi, the journey felt like an adventure, a journey to heaven. She pressed her face against the window, marveling at the sights she had never seen before. Tall buildings, bustling streets, and people from all walks of life filled her vision. The city was alive, vibrant, and overwhelming. Uncle Gbero noticed her wide-eyed wonder and smiled. "You'll get used to the city life soon," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's a place of opportunities, and challenges." Fumi nodded, her heart racing with both excitement and a hint of nervousness. When they finally arrived at Uncle Gbero's house, Fumi gasped. The mansion was enormous, far grander than anything she had ever seen. Her uncle led her inside, where she was given snacks and seated on a plush couch to watch television. Uncle Gbero was a successful businessman, rich, powerful, and respected. He lived with his wife and 2 children in the city of Lagos. But his wife was often away, traveling from one state to another for her business. She rarely stayed home, visiting only twice a month, if at all. As the days passed, Fumi began to notice something strange. Her uncle's behavior toward her was changing. At first, it seemed innocent, a pat on the shoulder, a lingering touch on her arm. But soon, his actions became more frequent, more intrusive. Fumi felt uneasy, but she didn't know what to do. She was just a child, far from home, with no one to turn to. One Saturday, Fumi was in the living room with Uncle Gbero's children when she heard her name called. It was her uncle, his voice sharp and commanding. She hurried to his bedroom, where he sat on the edge of his bed, watching a small television. He looked at her, his eyes lingering on her dress. "Fumi," he said slowly, "go and get me a glass of water." "Okay, uncle," she replied quickly, eager to please. She rushed to the kitchen, her heart pounding. When she returned with the water, Uncle Gbero took the glass and set it aside. Then, without warning, he stood up and locked the door. Fumi froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Fumi," he said, his voice low, "I want you to give me something." "Uncle, I don't have anything to give you," she stammered, her mind racing. "I'm just a girl, what can I give you?" Uncle Gbero stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You have something," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "Something my wife hardly gives me." Fumi's heart pounded as his hand slid down her arm. She jerked away, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Uncle, my mommy told me never to let anyone touch me there," she said, her voice shaking. But Uncle Gbero only smiled. "Your mother also told you to obey me, didn't she? She knows I won't hurt you. Just let me touch you. It's nothing." Fumi hesitated, torn between fear and confusion. She remembered her mother's warning, "Do whatever your uncle tells you to do." Reluctantly, she stood still, her body tense as Uncle Gbero's hands moved where they shouldn't. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't cry out. She didn't know how. Meanwhile, in the living room, Uncle Gbero's children waited for Fumi to return. They heard faint sounds, whimpers, cries, but didn't understand what was happening. Dandy, the older child, finally stood up. "I'll go check on her," he said, his voice uncertain. He walked to his father's bedroom and tried the door. It was locked. "Father," he called, knocking softly. "Is everything okay?" Inside, Uncle Gbero froze. He quickly unlocked the door and opened it, his face calm. "Dandy," he said, his voice steady, "Fumi had a little accident. She fell and hurt her arm. I was just helping her." Dandy glanced at Fumi, who stood silently, her eyes downcast. "Are you okay, Fumi?" he asked. She nodded, unable to speak. That night, Fumi lay in bed, her mind racing. She felt trapped, scared, and alone. The next day, her mother arrived for a visit. Fumi wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in her throat. "How are you, Fumi?" her mother asked, her eyes searching her daughter's face. "I'm fine, Mommy," Fumi whispered, forcing a smile. But her mother sensed something was wrong. "Fumi, is everything okay?" she pressed. Fumi hesitated, her heart aching. Before she could answer, Uncle Gbero walked in, all smiles and charm. "Don't worry," he said smoothly, "Fumi is in good hands. She's a very obedient girl." Fumi's mother nodded, but her eyes lingered on her daughter, filled with unspoken questions. When her mother left 2 weeks later, Fumi felt a wave of despair. That night, as she cleaned the house, she heard her uncle call her name again. Her heart sank. She knew what was coming. Slowly, she walked to his room, her steps heavy. "Fumi," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "come here. Let's play our game." She shook her head. "Uncle, it makes me uncomfortable." But he only smiled. "It's just a game," he said, his tone soothing. "You'll get used to it." Just then, a knock echoed through the house. "Darling, it's me. Open the door." It was Uncle Gbero's wife, back from her travels. Fumi's heart leaped with hope. As her uncle hurried to unlock the door, Fumi felt a surge of relief. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe.
You are now watching Aftermath Stories. Thank you for watching. Please do like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Let me know what you think about this story.